Hello everyone, my name is Arvind Nadig and I run this company called Li2. And today I'm going to interact with you on this concept of what we call as design thinking. This whole session is specifically, structured to give you a walkthrough of how we can apply the concept of design thinking in the idea submission and idea generation portal of the Cisco Incubator. As you must already be aware, Cisco Incubator, in association with NASSCOM Foundation, is a network of makerspaces and online content, as well as cohorts of collaborators, innovators, and mentors to, work together and bring out innovation that could impact in a large way. The whole process is revolving around technology and how we can apply technology towards solving problems. So essentially, from taking ideas to implementation in a very, very impactful way. So, in a nutshell, that is what Thinkubator is all about. And let me get started with introducing very quickly on how and what has happened with Thinkubator. I'll take a couple of minutes on that, and then we'll directly dive into this concept of what we call as design thinking and how design thinking can be applied. So let me share my screen and quickly walk you through this portal of the Incubator. So as most of you must already be aware, Thinkubator has been around for the last 3 years, and I've been fortunate enough to be involved right from the inception of this program, working through cohorts across various colleges, virtual platforms, as well as mentorship and training. So now, as part of this large community that we have, we've been able to work with various student cohorts, innovators. Close to about 9 startups have been incubated over the past couple of years that we've been working on this. We've got some amazing projects that's come out, and obviously the digital content and the events and the network effect that this whole ecosystem has caused is intangible but quite amazing. So I'm very happy to be back here for this year's cohort and give you an opportunity to collaborate with us, present your ideas, structure it, and then work with us to take it to meaningful impact. So once you get into this portal, you can walk through the whole thing, the kind of work that we've been doing, and ASCOM Foundation along with the Cisco Incubator and various things. You can very easily walk through this. And now, more specifically, why we are here. So we are here to be able to understand how best to apply to the and submit your ideas into the incubator, and then what are the tools or the mechanisms that we can use in order to take your idea or a concept into a very meaningful structure and present it so that then we can work towards implementation. So once you log in here, you can log in. If you've not logged in before, you can sign up, obviously, and create your own account. Once that's done, you can log in. And to save time, I've just done the steps for you. And here we are. So once you log in, you are presented with a dashboard with a trident. Essentially, it gives you an overview of your activity on the portal. So here, what we'll do is get into projects. Once we get into projects here, you can go out and create a project, right? So I've already created a couple of sample projects that we can look through as we go forward. But to create a project, essentially, you will have to click on that, and then there is a series of questionnaire and a certain methodology. So I'll walk you through this quickly. Before we do that, the basic idea of this submission is to be able to articulate your ideas or the solution that you're trying to develop or you want to develop with the perspective of the beneficiary. Who we call as a beneficiary is the end user of this program or your solution that you are developing, and how that will change or impact their process or their activity and help them remove the problem or overcome that situation and move to a better position, right? So that's the whole concept. And in order to do that, I want to present to you the concept of what we call as design thinking. And what is design thinking and how it can be applied is something that we will talk about. So let me then walk you through design thinking first for about 10-15 minutes and then come back here. So essentially, this is a workflow which is very simple. As you can see here, there's a challenge that you will be presenting, and then how this challenge can become an idea, and then a series of questions revolving around the concept of design thinking and revolving around essentially the end beneficiary, or what we call as the end user, sometimes the customer and sometimes somebody who uses your solution. All of these people who will come in direct contact with the solution is the center of this portal, right? So once you become clear of that, and once you are stepping away from the idea that I'm going to build that, I'm going to build this, and then step back and say, what is the problem I'm trying to solve, and how will people in that circle benefit from my solution? If you start looking at it that way, the whole insight opens up, and this exercise is about that, right? So let me just directly dive into this quick presentation that I've made for you. So this is about design thinking and product development lifecycle. Obviously, I'm not going to delve into product development at this point because we are specifically focusing on design thinking. So what is design thinking? What is the framework that we are talking about, and how do we take idea to implementation? A very quick walkthrough of this concept. I will try and squeeze this in a way that would be fast and easy for you. So where do we start? Typically, all of us, when we are working on projects or anything that we want to do, we dive into the thing like, oh wow, I have this wonderful idea and I want to implement this, right? This is typically how all of us want to do. But then if you look a little deeper, it's not the idea that actually makes the impact. It's the way you structure a certain problem and then build ideas on top of that, and then most importantly, execute the idea, right? So ideas are dime a dozen. So yes, this whole cycle is called idea submission and your challenge submission. But I'm just giving you a small note that don't obsess on the fact that your idea is everything. In fact, I will flip it around and say that first let us go and understand what we are trying to solve. And then once we get that clear insight, and not by imagination, not by sitting and just thinking about the problem, but actually going out and reaching out to people. Yes, it might be the time of pandemic, and going out and reaching out to people will be difficult. But then there are there are very many methods that we can apply to reach out and figure this out. So that's what this whole session is about. So design thinking essentially is an approach of solving problems and understanding user needs. Please remember, it's user needs, right? And developing insights. So this is all design thinking is about. Needs to insight. It's nothing to do with idea and then figuring out what to do. No, it's about the need, the problem, and then understanding the problem, and then automatically by design, or what we call as by evolution, you will have ideas. And then we come out with a process of how to test and evaluate, right? So that's the whole process. So as I said, design thinking is not just a process, or it's not just a methodology, but it's also a mindset. What I mean by mindset is that you are always revolving around revolving around the end user and how you can impact. What is the insight? What is the process? And this whole cycle is what we call as empathy, right? So the process, essentially, design thinking has 5 typical stages, right? I mean, these are not rules. Please remember, design thinking is not about 1, 2, 3, 4. As you can see, there are dotted lines around here, and there are various subjects, right? Empathize, define, ideate, prototype, and test. These are the 5 stages. But typically, it's not linear, right? We have to kind of work towards making it linear. What I mean by that is, most of the cases, we are in the stage of idea. So we start with an idea. Oh, let us build a drone, right? Or let us go and do something in machine learning for solving problems, right? So that's typically how the idea starts, right? Or somebody else will say, oh, I think now this is the pandemic time, so let me just create a digital platform for maybe shopping, or for maybe education, or for anything. Let's move everything digital. These are ideas, right? Which are great. I'm not saying these are wrong. But the only problem with that is the context of the idea is driven by centering you as an innovator, and not the end user, or the person who's, or people, or set of people who are going to benefit from this particular exercise of innovation, right? So we have to very consciously move away from idea, and go towards what we call as empathize. So what do you mean by empathize? So empathize, essentially the word empathy means to understand very clearly who or what a person who's ahead of you, where whom you want to help or solve a problem. You understand the situation very clearly, right? Understanding the human needs involved is empathizing, and then we proceed further, right? So that the most important thing that we do there is we observe, engage, and watch and listen, right? So this is the primary step that we will have to take. And for that, there are various methods, and once we do that, we get into definition. And what I mean by definition is, you define your solution not as an idea, not as what you're going to do, but you're going to define your solution or approach with respect to the user journey, or how the end user is going to get impacted, right? If you define a problem that way, it's most easiest thing to do. For instance, if you talk of Uber or any of these taxi riding share apps, you don't go and tell that it's a taxi sharing app digital platform. I would rather understand if you tell me that you take out your phone, just click a button, and the car is here. You just walk in to the car and reach your destination and just walk out. You don't have to worry about parking. This sentence is more impactful there to me as an end user than if you come and tell me it's a digital platform, it is a network of cars, and it's all meaningless to me. What's important to me is I can open my phone, click a button, car is here, I sit down, and I go to my destination, and I just walk out, and the money is gone, and it's the safest thing to do, right? This is a definition, right? You can define your, for example, any company in various ways. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. But if you can define it from how you are going to do it, or how you as an end user is going to experience, that's the best definition we can put in, right? So our exercise today in the form submission and idea submission is typically going to be between empathize, define, and eventually get into idea, right? The first three steps. Then we have the steps of prototyping and testing that will come much later, which we don't want to break our thought right now, because the first step is to talk to humans. What I mean by talking to humans is you observe, you engage, you watch, and listen, right? So very, very important, because most of the times, I speak to a lot of students across over the past many years of my work with education and innovation and product development. I've seen that the people tend to get carried away by this particular thing, and you don't tend to observe, you don't engage, you just assume, right? Huge difference, right? You assume that I'll make a device and this device will benefit blind people. No, I don't know, right? Maybe or may not be. It's a huge risk that you will take. To break that, the first thing you'll have to do is actually go out and understand. See, and what do you do there? Again, actually go out and don't try and sell, right? So let me go here. It's not about going and selling. Usually what we do is we go out and try to sell our solution. Hey, I have this device, will you use it? It works this way, it works that way. That's not talking to humans, and that's not empathy. Empathy is the other way. You listen 95% of the times, and you just speak when it is needed, right? Or you observe. That's what we call it as. The first and foremost thing that you need to evaluate is, does the problem exist? If the problem exists, then you will have 20 ideas. All of these 20 ideas, one, two, three, four of them, are these ideas meaningful, right? Then the third aspect, which we will not delve into right now, is the economics of this thing to be successful. I'm not talking about business. I'm talking about economics. There's a huge difference. That is, you come up with a solution which is a device, which is a LiDAR-based solution for blind people, and maybe that headset costs 25,000 or maybe 2 lakh rupees. Is it viable, right? That's something that you need to evaluate at a later stage. But for now, let's forget it. Let's just look at these two. That is, does the problem exist, and is the solution meaningful, right? So how do we do that? We go out, be prepared, prepare a questionnaire, and don't try to, try to push your things. In fact, like, look at point number 6. Ask for advice. 95% of the times, listen to the conversation. And, there are so many things like this. Look for patterns, right? This is the most important thing. And that's what we call as insight. You need to talk to enough and many people, observe and engage to get these patterns, right? And once we get these patterns, we start calling it as personas and behaviors, right? Once you're able to get to that stage, you have very big clarity on who is that set of end users who are going to benefit from your thought process and your solution. Once you reach there, the whole process of design thinking becomes natural progression. That is, you have now understood the problem, the group of people who are facing this problem. Then you go out and define how you are going to address this in their journey, right? In order to form a user point of view. And then you sit and ideate on how best you can implement this, right? So ideas is not about new things or breakthrough things which are not existing. Idea is about how do we get our insights and take it to a user journey in a way that is the most creative, most effective methodology, right? So this is typically how the idea generation portal or the process should work. Then we'll get into prototyping and testing. So empathizing, as I mentioned, we'll go through this cycle. Now, what are you trying to find, right? What are you trying to find with empathy? Is, in the end of the day, you try to say, what is the value that comes out of this whole ecosystem? What is value? Value is not about money, right? Value is not about a tangible thing. Value is a perception, right? So value is always something. For instance, and I always take this example, it's about somebody owning a luxury bag versus the same material, the same design, but without that logo is another bag, which probably is more tough and it performs better, right? And one costs $100 or maybe $1,000. The other one costs just about 50 cents, right? Or maybe $10, right? So, which for certain people, the 10 cents or the $1 one is okay, but for a lot of people, you aspire to have that particular bag or designer wear or a car or a watch or it could be anything, right? A phone or anything for that matter. The brand perception, the kind of satisfaction you get from the product or the solution, that's the value, right? So that is what you need to identify in this whole process of empathizing and design thinking. Once you have identified that value proposition for the end user, then it's very easy to work backwards and understand the ecosystem where the end users exist. What is the process to reach that and then eventually how my product or solution is going to scale, how I'm going to benefit from it as an organization, and how the whole impact is optimized, right? To reach that stage, value proposition for whom? Not for you, not for everyone, not for the technology, but for the end user. That's it. This is all the crux of design thinking, where you eventually move towards value proposition. So I'd like to urge you, before you start filling out your forms, just see, put a note saying what is your value proposition. Just think through the whole cycle. Okay, maybe this impact will happen, maybe that impact will happen if I build this product, if I use this technology. There are so many ways of looking at it. If you have these things kind of listed down, then it becomes easy for you to then work backwards. I'm not saying this is the final, this is still an assumption stage, where list your value proposition on what you envision for your product, not the idea. I'm saying the value proposition, how and what are those elements that will help them benefit. So this is where is the breakdown of the structure. You look at an idea, then look at the value proposition, then eventually look at the market or the whole ecosystem, and then see entrepreneurs. I call it as entrepreneurs, as not just you and me who are developing the product, but the entire ecosystem. Entrepreneurs are everywhere. The ecosystem that will make this idea into reality. That's the ecosystem that I'm talking about here. These is the four pillars or the foundation on which your whole project and innovation will be built upon. Idea, value, market, and eventually the people who are going to drive this as an ecosystem, the entrepreneurs, right? See the approach. There are two ways of starting this, right? So when you're going and filling out the form, just remember this. I think this is the last part that I would like to talk to you and give you an idea is two approaches. One is top down, the other one is bottom up. Very simply put, top down means you look at something from the bird's eye view. You go and say that, AI is the future and let's do something in AI or something like that. Or broadly, you go and say, I'm going to sort out the education sector. I'm going to sort out the medical sector or anything that way, right? So that's the top down approach. And then you break it down. But eventually you will have to come to a stage of persona or the person. So I would really advise you to look at a bottom-up scenario first. That is, there is a particular problem that I can solve, and I have competency as a team or myself or inclination or passion towards a certain top-down vertical or towards a certain area. Just keep these two broad, vague segments in your mind. That is, I'm going to address in my competency area for a certain type of person, right? So once you do that, then you kind of start bringing both together, and that's the approach you start taking. This is if you have not yet identified what you want to do, and if you don't have an idea or an inkling towards that, right? So essentially, how we look at it. So let me take banking as a sector, right? I want to work in finance because I understand statistics. I understand machine learning algorithms. So that's a top-down approach. There's global validation towards that, right? Derivatives and companies are a huge impact in this space, right? But the bottom up is who is going to benefit. Am I going to benefit a banker who sits at the counter? Am I going to benefit the bank itself, or am I going to benefit the user who uses my app and tries to invest in the stock market? I don't know, right? So these are all the different things. So then you see the activity. For example, now it's a time of COVID, right? So we talk about safety of let us talk about the person sitting at the bank counter, the teller. Then what do? They collect notes. The notes are not safe. So that's where the problem starts. So you empathize from that situation and see how I can make it safer for them to use notes. So that's a bottom-up approach. The top-down approach for the same problem will be to see, does the bank have a problem? And will they be able to invest in machinery? And is this ecosystem going to be valid across the next 5 years for the banks to invest in infrastructure? You start from those kind of questions, right? Which is very difficult because how do you reach out at that scale? So those will be most of the times assumptions. But the bottom up is easy because you can go to a bank as a teller. What is your process of collecting money? Do you feel safe? If you don't feel safe, what do you think will make you feel safer? One is, should you not touch the notes, or do you need a shield in front of you, or do you need some kind of screening, or you need test reports of the customers who walk in? What is it that will make you feel safe? List down those things and then start building your solution, right? So I think broadly, this is how I would like to see the structure of your thing. And this is the design thinking process, right? So let's now do a quick recap and say that I'm going to work on empathy. What I mean by empathy is centering the end user and then observe and engage with them. Then I'm going to define my solution or the approach with respect to the end user and eventually ideate the best way I can create a user journey persona and how they can use and impact my solution, get impacted by my solution. So with this, I think I have tried to kind of very quickly condense the concept of design thinking. Obviously, design thinking is a huge portion of what we do in terms of innovation. But this is not about just design thinking, but it's about your submission of ideas. So let's just jump into that and see what we can do in that place, right? So here we are in the portal. So once I get into the portal, as I mentioned, you have this. So let me go there and if I say fill out the given form and submit a detailed report on what you're trying to do, and then come back and then explore. So first of all, what is the idea title? The idea title is maybe design or whatever you want to call it. Save and next. Here it is. Now that you've identified the high level challenge, try to the challenge that I have identified is design thinking workshop, but then it can be anything for you, right? Now do a little research and come up with the specific problems under the selected challenge. For example, we have written down some examples on fuel efficiency and emissions and climate change to women safety or into cleaning the rivers. It could be anything. I don't know. For me, it's design. So I am talking about design thinking, right? So what is the challenge? My challenge is how to help the cohort submit best ideas. That's the first thing. Now the other challenge is how to make the journey for the cohort faster and effective. This is what my thought process is, right? So this is an identify challenge. So I'm going to put it down and then I'm going to come back tomorrow and write more. So then save and go next. So who's the user? I have already, in fact, I'm sorry, but, typically the user is not identified here, but, I have kind of already said that it's the cohort. Once I do that, then I can go out and, put things together, right? So then we say, do you think this problem exists? Do you know anyone who is facing this? What are the problems? How do we take it from there, right? So these are the things that the 5 or 6 questions that we need to answer is here. How much would you pay to fix it? As I was mentioning in my presentation also, right? These are the simple talking to human steps, right, that you can employ. And this is very important. Please remember that when you're doing this, it's not about sitting and writing an exam. This is not going to happen on this computer screen at all. In fact, it's going to essentially happen at the back end where you go and, meet these people, talk to these people, right? So one of the best ways of doing that is there are 2 links that we have provided to you here. You just click on them, there is something called as the design kit. The 5 whys are there. You can go out and see, read this up. Essentially, keep asking why until you have the answer, right? So that's typically one of the ways of doing it. And then you look at interviewing. So I was talking about this book called as Talking to Humans, and this is another thing on the design kit where you can go out and see the same thing. Go prepared. Essentially, go prepared. Don't assume. Get the information. Listen and be prepared to, let them give out the solution, not impose your solution on them. Because if you do that, then this whole exercise of design thinking is futile, and you're going to develop a product. I'm not saying you're not going to develop a product, but it might most likely be utterly meaningless for most of the end users that you're trying to. It might be fancy, it might be nice, it might be a nice presentation that you do, but it won't scale, it won't reach the masses, it won't really impact and affect people the way you want it to, right? So it's important that how you go and reach out and talk to people. Read this through. It's essentially the basis of design thinking on which the design kit is being developed. The 5 whys has been developed. But if you look at very clearly, the user validation of what I'm trying to talk about is how you can go and actually talk to the end user and get the answers from them, and then build insights rather than you doing it yourself. That's all. Then eventually the user journey and story. What I mean by that is, what happens. I was talking about Uber, right? I go, click the button, car comes here, sit in the car, I go to the destination, get off, and walk away, and the money gets deducted. This is my journey. Before, it used to be, I used to either call a friend or go to the road and try to call a auto or a taxi, talk to them, negotiate with them, give them the address. They will ask for more money, and sometimes it's raining and I don't get a cab. So there are so many things that was a problem for me, and I can just relate to all of this and say, better off sitting at home pressing a button and I'm done, right? That's the journey I want you to envision and put it out here. And then eventually, obviously, the team and what you're going to do, right? That comes last. But then most importantly here, that this list is there, I'd like to mention that it's not just team members who are your friends, right? Right now you will enter that and your team, but then when you're building out your team, please understand that anybody in this ecosystem who could make this idea of yours come true is a team member. You might not have to write those names here, but when you're going out to build, it's very important that you understand, what benefit they can bring into the table. What do they know? How can they help you network? How can they help you solve the problem? These are the elements that you need to ask before bringing the team members. It's not about best friends working together. It's good to work with friends, but it's not ideal always, because there needs to be complementary skill sets, and there needs to be vision and diversion of vision and convergence of vision both at the same time. So it's something that you need to very carefully watch out for. So now the last part is, I'm going to just walk you through small presentation that was we submitted. One of the users we had has submitted. Here they say that it's a hydraulically actuated autonomous nurse, right? So what the student group here has done is they have gone and said that they have identified a challenge that shifting patients who are immobile is a huge challenge for nurses, and how we can bring about a robotic solution for that. So that's the whole challenge that they identified, and that's the whole process where they walk you through this process by saying the challenge. The aim of our project is to improve patient safety and comfort while alleviating the risk of occupation-related injuries to nurses, staff, and thus allowing them to function effectively to mitigate the shortage of nurses in the country. This is the challenge. And to reach this point, I worked with this cohort very closely, and they've been doing work over the past 2 years, 3 years now, to reach this stage, the number of prototypes that they had to develop, the number of concepts that they had to come was a huge challenge, right? So who is the user? So it's the nursing homes, elderly homes, where the patients are immobile, and the user is the person who will be lifting them, right? So they're trying to do that. A target demographic would be middle level and high level hospitals. So that is their customer base. The user base is the person who lifts, right? So they've identified all of these, and then eventually, how did they validate? They actually went out, spoke to a hospital, got the project from them to build a prototype, then took it, and then here is the user journey, right? So when you say user journey, I'm not sure if you can see, but it's a more mature project structure. But why I'm putting this here is that, remember, this whole journey or the project was not something that was written in a day, right? It was something that has taken a certain amount of time to, kind of put through. For instance, it was initially started with I'm going to build a quick robot or a small robot, and then eventually it was taken to a stage where I'm going to bring in hydraulics, I'm going to reduce the cost. So before you reach there, what's something very important to understand in this whole thing is, forget about the project, I don't want to bias you with all of these. This was just an example, but then what I'm trying to say here is this, right? Identifying the challenge. Imagine going to work every day, lifting and turning up 60 kg of load repetitively, sometimes up to 60 times a day. This is the problem. So please understand how they have put the problem in. They are not saying that I want to build a robot which will help move patients from one point A to point B, which is nice, which is correct, which is an idea. But then when you do empathy, what happens is you bring user first. So you're talking to the user. Imagine going to work every day and lifting patients 60 times a day. And how would it feel? What would happen? What is the risk for a hospital? Now you go and tell the hospital that you are doing this, and what if the patients have dropped and fallen? And maybe there have been scenarios like that which hospitals are aware of, and that's why they would like to invest. If the hospital says no, I've never had these problems, and I don't want this machine, then your idea is done there, right? But then this project went on to become a product right now because the problem exists, right? Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So that is what you need to identify. Once the challenge is identified, then it becomes very easy, right? So with this, I hope you were able to understand how we go out and create a project and do this. So what I would suggest, as a thing is, before you start doing that, look at the few points that I mentioned in terms of design thinking, and then look at empathy, talking to humans, right? So that's the first thing. End user in mind. That's the base. The user journey is based on the end user. How my project is going to move, or how my solution is going to help the end user. That's all. Write it in terms of their story, the way they are going to do it. Talk to them. Then it becomes very easy how we can ideate and evolve, right? Right now, your job is to just identify this much and put it out in the portal. Once you have done that, we will evaluate, work with you, and then we can go out and do more sessions, identify technologies that can help you in this problem, and take the process forward with the Incubator platform. So, but at this point, as I mentioned, empathy is the only thing that you need to focus on. End user, talk to them, and then bring out a user journey. What would it be with my solution, and what it was without my solution? Once you're done with that, I think we are good to go, right? So with this, I think more or less put together the whole framework for your idea submission, and then try to compress the concept of design thinking, bringing in the end user value proposition in progress. So wish you all the best, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the whole community of the Cisco Incubator coming forward and working with students and innovators to make an impact. So let's work together. Let's take this forward. Wish you all the best. Thank you.